Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. I am your host Keith and today I am chatting with Becky. Hello Becky.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm really well, thank you.
Jolly good. And the reason why we've got Becky on today is because I asked her to come and do a podcast because Becky's kind of a little bit unique in the sense of she's just done back-to-back trips of Kilimanjaro and then she went and did Everest Base Camp. Was that like 2 weeks in between, Becky?
Yeah, I think just under 2 weeks.
Just under 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, you know, the pain was still very real from her from doing Kilimanjaro. And she did Kilimanjaro with me. And then she went out and did Everest Base Camp with Dave. Obviously, we're not going to put her on the spot and ask her, you know, which was the best guide, because that wouldn't be fair to ask her on here. And it wouldn't be fair on Dave either for the answer. But so, Becky, I think, you know, I went and did Kilimanjaro with you. And I remember speaking to you in the airport and you were kind of wide-eyed and very unsure. And you were like, I have never done anything like this before.
Yeah, absolutely never. First time, you know, really being out in the outdoors, camping and whatnot. Just all of it was so new to me. So
what made you not only book one group, because that was your first group, it was your first group travel trip? Oh no, because you've been to Canada, haven't you?
Yeah.
So you've been to Canada, that was your first group trip. So what possessed you then to then book onto Kilimanjaro? And then where did the idea to go, do you know what, I'm going to book Everest Base Camp 2 weeks later as well?
I would love to say there was logic behind it in terms of, I'll be altitude ready. You know, I'll be really in that state of being in the outdoors and in the wild and not showering for weeks. But there really wasn't much rationale in that sense. It was just a case of, I can get the annual leave, the dates line up, let's just do it. And, you know, part of me thinks it was quite stupid because I hadn't done any high altitude, you know, mountaineering or anything before. But it actually worked out really well in terms of being prepared for the second trip, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not saying to everyone, you know, we're not advising that you go and book back-to-back trips like this. But what was it that, you know, just heading back, what made you one day think, you know, because this is completely out of the blue for you, you know, walking, being in the, you know, you're from North Wales, but you're from Wrexham, so you're not really from North Wales, are you? You're on the border, really. But, you know, trekking was not something that was a hobby of yours for you to suddenly go, I'm going to go and do Kilimanjaro and Everest Base Camp.
Yeah. I think I was saying to you in the airport, a lot of it was just that I had not done anything in my life really that was that exciting prior to doing these trips. And I just had this thought of, you know, I'm sure I can do it. I'm sure I just can. Like, if you just push yourself hard enough. And I do think I had a reasonably good mindset to do it. And I just thought, even if I'm not physically fit enough, I think mentally I'm capable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you just made that decision, book it and go.
But I thought, don't think about it too much. I thought, don't even really research. I didn't really know anything about either of the destinations that much. I seen a few Instagram posts and thought, yeah, go on, just do it. And it was only as I was getting close to the trips that I really looked at the things on YouTube and I thought, goodness.
Yeah, it's always really interesting from a guide's perspective when you are leading a trip and people turn up with their brand new shiny kit that's it's only just been taken out of the bag. I mean, obviously, when you turned up to Everest Base Camp, your stuff would have been dusty, I expect, and it would have looked well used. But yeah, I know on the Kilimanjaro trip, you were one of the ones where it was kind of like, do I need this? Do I need that? What's this for? Like, yeah. I've bought everything off the kit list, but yeah, it was you were definitely one of the wide-eyed ones.
I was definitely all the gear, no idea, I think, a little bit.
Well, I mean, hopefully you learned quite a lot on the Kilimanjaro one that you then took to Everest Base Camp with you as well then.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, do you want to just talk us through the Everest Base Camp trip from your perspective? Because obviously we've done loads of podcasts on Everest Base Camp. I've been chatting with Jake about it.
Yeah.
But it's very easy for us to talk about it when we've done it so many times. But, you arrive in Tanzania, and, for me, it's just like going back home every year to go back to Tanzania. But for some, but for new people that have never been to Tanzania before, I kind of forget that culture shock of what I first felt when I went there, 20 years ago when I first went to Tanzania. So just want to talk us through from like getting off the plane in the trip and how you found it and the group travel, and just talk us through the whole experience for you.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the culture shock was a big thing for me. Definitely even initially going to Kilimanjaro, because I've been to Canada, which is very similar, I think, to the UK, really. And even before that, destination-wise, where I've been in the world, I've been to the US, I've been to Dubai, like nowhere that different. So getting off the plane and seeing kind of just how people are living, I didn't really expect to see that. I don't know what I was thinking again, but that was definitely a big shock. But one of the most pleasant things of the trip, of both trips actually, was just meeting the local people and how absolutely lovely everyone is. From the guides to just shopkeepers to just everyone. And also how people live so humbly in different countries. That was like a fascinating experience, and something that I would never forget. But yeah, I definitely, it's a long flight going to both places. Wasn't ready for that either. But also, someone like me overpacked to death. So, I was there on both trips, actually. I didn't learn this in my second trip. I overpacked immensely, even to the point where my second suitcase was full of glamorous go out clothes. I don't know at what point I thought that was
where you thought you were going.
Yeah. But yeah, and also group travel. I think that a lot of people that come on the trips, certainly for myself as well, think, okay, I'm booking on the trip because I want to achieve this goal. I want to get to the summit. I want to get to base camp or whatever. But it soon changes when you go on the trip. You soon find that it's more about the journey and more about the people that you make friends with. And it's really incredible how the people that you make friends with get you through the journey that you're about to go on. I don't know, I expected to make friends, I thought, because I'm quite a chatty person, I'm quite friendly, but I wasn't ready for how much people like become part of your family and how much you rely on them to get you to the summit.
Yeah, I think obviously I can't comment on your EBC group because I wasn't there, but I think our Kilimanjaro group that we had in September was a really special group. I loved the fact that obviously we did a podcast with Craig the other day, and it was really funny because there's been a bit of banter in the WhatsApp group because obviously Craig commented on a couple of the older people in the group who they quickly jumped into the WhatsApp group. But I just think having that, you get so many people from different walks of life.
Yeah.
And I think, if everybody was a 20-something female in the group, or if everybody was a 40-something bloke in the group, like you would not have the dynamics that we get on our groups of having a complete mix of ages. There was a couple that, there was a few people there that already knew each other beforehand, but the majority of people came out like you as a single traveler, didn't know anybody beforehand, rocked up to the airport and kind of said, "Hi, I'm Becky." Like that was, and I think that's what makes it lovely, that everybody just gets on all the time.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And like you said, you just don't mix with these kind of people day to day in your life, really. Like obviously, at your workplace, maybe you have people of different ages and whatnot. But what was interesting, I found, is the difference between the Kili trip and the EBC trip. I think with the Kili trip, there was a lot more people my age, so naturally you kind of meander towards them, don't you, to spend time with and whatnot. But on the EBC trip, I was one of the younger people, quite a lot.
Right.
And initially I was like, oh, where's the young people at? But actually, older people are great, and it just does older.
There we are. Becky's just said older people are great.
Should get that on a t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah, if Kevin Sharon from Kilimanjaro, if you're listening, Becky did think you were great. Older people are great.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Actually, the older people are always the better ones. I don't know. Based on my 2 trips, the older ones seem to be much more good at endurance and getting through stuff, in my experience.
No, I think you're completely right there.
Yeah.
Look at old man Dave, for example. The guy's 70 years old. Look,
Yeah, he just cracks on with it. Or I'm
he does indeed. So, how did you find Kilimanjaro then? Like, for never done, you've never climbed a mountain before like that. Yeah. Kilimanjaro was your first kind of, I'm going to go and climb a mountain. Like, talk us through like the experience from getting on the mountain to summit night, coming back down again. Like, how was it for you?
Well, I think it starts off in the jungle, right? And you think, okay, this is fine. This is good. I think I was fairly fast-ish on that day. Not that I was trying to be fast, I wasn't. But obviously you're excited. You think, okay, great. This is amazing. We got to the first camp, the first hut. And I was with my 2 new best friends. And it was just, the vibes were on point, and we have dinner. I thought, this is just incredible. Like, why haven't I done this sooner in my life?
We had a birthday cake and we sang songs for about half an hour and
literally half an hour. I think it was a bit much. No, it was amazing. And yeah, I think we all slept really well that night. We thought, we can do this. If it's like this every day, of course we can do this. And then the second day came and it was really warm. Do you remember? It was really, really warm and lovely. Because we're coming out of the forest, aren't we? Out of the jungle.
Yeah.
And it was that day that I felt really nauseous. And
I remember.
Yeah. And it kind of just hit me. I didn't. Yeah, it just came out all of a sudden. It was all going really well, and then all of a sudden I felt really sick, and I thought, oh no, what is this now? And I guess it was the altitude. I think it is the altitude to this day. So it was a tough...
I think. I mean, it could have been the altitude, but I also think for you on that day, like you were it was fairly cold when we left on that morning. You were fairly well dressed up.
Yeah.
And then obviously we came out and the sun was beating down and it was really hot. And I do still think that perhaps because we still weren't really that high at that point, but I think, maybe you were just sort of overheated at that point because I mean, and you work in medicine, I don't, but like, you should know these things.
That's what my mum tells me when I'm sick. I should know. But yeah, I think I was definitely overheating as well because I did, if you remember, I had loads of layers and my bag was also way too heavy. I don't know what I was carrying in that bag. So this was all part of the learning curve, I think, very, very quickly. But luckily I felt okay after we had a little bit of a break and whatnot. But that day I found really hard. I thought, oh my goodness, it's going on forever, But the good thing is, I think, with every single day, even though there was times where it was really ridiculously hard and we felt sick or we felt tired or whatever, by the time you get to camp in the evening, you kind of decompress and, you chat to your friends and you just have a good time, like reflect on the day, look at photos, take photos. And that really helps you kind of prepare for the next day ahead.
Yeah, because on Kilimanjaro, you don't get into camp late, do you? You get into camp like mid-afternoon. You do have quite a lot of time to, sit around, chill, play cards. Yeah. We were doing the Marangu route, so we had the dining huts. So you would go in there, have a cup of tea. People would have a game of cards in there, or you'd go back to the room and just sit there and chat with people. And it just gives you time to sort of recover, I think, and get ready for the next day.
Yeah, definitely. I think that also I just touched on what I said earlier about like how you very quickly create a support network. And I think early on, there was a few occasions on our trip, I know I felt really sick and one of the other girls had a bit of a rough time. I think the same day I did. I don't think I could have really done it if I didn't have my new friends kind of helping me along. And just, it sounds silly that you need someone else to tell you you're going to be okay, like just crack on, but it's so wonderful to have that in the evening when you're feeling a bit crap, when you're knackered and you think, oh God, can I even do tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it's important as well during the day when you're actually doing the trek, because there's always, when you're in a group, and like we get loads of comments on like our Facebook posts and stuff saying, you'll put a picture up of one of our groups and everyone's like, oh, I couldn't think of anything worse trekking with all of those people. Like, why do you want to go with so many people? And I'm like, why would you want to do it by yourself? Like for me, I would to spend, I don't think I could think of anything worse than doing Everest Base Camp on my own for 13 days of putting one foot in front of the other. Yeah. Like for me, I like being, and for some people, I'm sure they'd love it and they love spending, their time with themselves. But for me, it would drive me insane, I think.
I absolutely agree. I think I'm an absolute danger to myself if I'm alone in my head for that long. And also, it's so nice just to chat to different people, isn't it? Like people that you don't normally meet. And you just have like the most randomest conversations. And I'll never forget one of the girls on the Kili trip, Jess. Like honestly, I think we made about 1,000 plans just when we were hiking. I remember one day she's like, "Do you want to go to India?" And I'm like, "Yeah." That never happens in day-to-day life when you're walking down the street and meeting, walking with your friends.
If you think about it, like when you're doing group travel, you are with those people for 24/7. More 24/7 because you're sharing a room with them. You're like when you go to work, you see people for 8 hours a day, and then you leave them, and you can get away. When you're on a group travel trip, you kind of don't have that option really, because you are together for the majority of the time, aren't you?
Yeah.
I remember you saying to me actually, because you were like, because you booked a single supplement, and I remember you saying to me, I was like, you were going on the safari afterwards, and I remember you going, I don't have to have a single supplement. I'll share with somebody. I don't need to be on my own. Like it was, you would come looking to kind of, I want my own space. But actually, within a couple of days of you being there, you were like, I don't want that anymore. I'll share with somebody. Like,
yeah, that happened almost instantly. Even when by the time we got to the hotel in Tanzania, for example, I regretted the single supplement. I didn't want it. I wanted to be with the girls that I just met. And I think I spent most of my time in everyone else's rooms. Like I literally just went to my room to sleep and that was it. And it's so funny. You're right. I booked these trips thinking, oh, I'm Miss Independent. I'm a solo traveler. I don't really need anyone. And it couldn't have been any more opposite. And moving forward, I don't want to do like solo stuff. I'm so keen to do more group events.
Well, that's perfect for me to hear. Is the owner of a group travel company? That's exactly what I want to be hearing. Talk us through Summit Night. We heard from Craig a couple of episodes ago of his Summit Night, but how was Summit Night for you on Kilimanjaro? What did I say? What did I say to you in the briefing? How did you take my briefing beforehand, and how accurate was it?
It was accurate, definitely accurate. When you emphasised how difficult it was going to be, I want to say awful, but it wasn't awful. It was just a challenge, to put it nicely. When you said it in the briefing, I was like, "It'll be fine. It'll be fine." I think I'm a bit of an optimist sometimes, and I thought it'll be grand. It's all good. It can't be that bad. But it was that bad. Summit night was horrific. It just kept going on and on and on. I thought it was the night that was never going to end and we were never going to reach the top. But when the sun started coming up, I think it gave us all hope that the day would end eventually and we would get to the top.
I think from my perspective, that sunrise at Gilman's Point on the Marangu route, I think is one of the most stunning sights you will ever see.
Yeah.
I mean, we were super lucky. It was super clear. And you just stand there and watch that sun come up and you can literally see the curvature of the world. Like it really highlights it. It's one of the only times that I think I can really say, to all those flat earthers out there, the world is round, because I can prove it. You go and stand on Gilman's Point and look out and watch the sunrise come up and you will see. And I just think it makes everyone feel so much better about, because you are literally hanging out there at that point. And I think you just get there, you suddenly, you're cold, you've been walking by head torch for the last 5-6 hours, and all of a sudden you can turn your head torches off. You start to feel a little bit of warmth coming back into you.
Yeah.
And like you say, you feel like you can crack on a little bit at that point.
Okay.
But you got there, like, you know, the whole team got there. And I think that was, again, one thing from the group is, I think, you know, it's so much nicer when you finally get to the summit with the people you started with 5 days beforehand, and you've kind of all achieved it together. I think that makes it an even more special moment.
Yeah, 100%. And you really do want, you know, everyone in your team to get there. Like, I don't think there was anyone that was completely out there just for themselves. You know, I think we were all rooting for each other 1,000,000%. I know I was looking for everyone, like, where is such and such, you know, where are they, all the time.
And then, like, obviously it's a bit of a long trek then back down to Horombo huts again.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously at that point you got to Horombo. Like, did it appear, you know, when did it suddenly you think to yourself? Because I always say to people, like, people like come down and go, I am never doing that again. Like, that was torture. That was horrendous. And I'm like, just give it a couple of days, just get back down and have a shower, have a glass of wine, and you'll feel completely different about it. But when did you suddenly realize and have it in your head that you were like, I've got to go to Everest Base Camp in 2 weeks' time?
Oh my goodness. It was so we got to the hut, so we had a sleep. We woke up the next day and we had that massively long walk, didn't we, back down to the beginning. It was that day that I was like, oh no, I am not ready for the forthcoming, you know, journey to base camp. And I'm glad that I didn't really research base camp much at this point, because I think we had a conversation briefly back in the hotel, and you were telling me about, you know, some days were worse than others because there's lots of ups and downs.
Yeah.
So I remember you saying that, but it didn't really sink in. I just thought, oh God, you know, I'm not ready for all the hills. But I kind of forgot about it, because by the time we got back to the lodge, you know, we had a party, we had some wine. I thought, it's grand, it's all good. I forgot the pain initially.
And then how did you feel as well?
Yeah.
Like, obviously you had such an amazing time. You made some really good friends on Kilimanjaro. Like, how did you then feel going to the airport to go to base camp?
I was apprehensive because I had such a positive experience, even at the airport when we did Kili. Because we all met, we had drinks before the flight. It was just, I thought it was really high energy. The vibes were on point. So when I went to the airport for base camp, it was a little different. And I think I initially went in with the expectation that it would be the same. So yeah, I just didn't meet as many people initially, and we didn't maybe have that party atmosphere initially. And I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this, really. It's a bit different. But, you know, again, as soon as you start chatting to people, everything changes. And I think that's what, you know, the good thing is, if you just, within 5 minutes of having a conversation with someone, it just opens up your perspective so much. You know?
Yeah. I think that's the best thing that I love about group travel is, like, you know, if I look through my Facebook nowadays, like, most of the people who are on my Facebook are people who I have done a trip with.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they'll ask to be your friend and you're like, yeah, that's fine. Like, they want to see the photos from the trip or whatever. But, you know, I think I get on well more with, like, I've never really, like, a lot of my friends are now from traveling. Like, I don't have friends from school, or, you know, all of my friends are from people that are in my life at the minute, rather than people who, you know, I knew 25 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing that I love about group travel. And I think you learn so much about people because you were spent, you know, what else have you got to talk about as you're trekking for 8 hours up to Tengboche? Like, you know, you just get into a conversation. That conversation's got no direction apart from wherever it ends up. And you just learn so much about people.
Yeah.
And it just amazes me, the sort of people that we get on our trips. I mean, you know, we worked out that both our families are from Wrexham. That we shared that in common straight away.
Exactly. Best place on earth.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, Wrexham's had you come out of it, and now it's got the Wrexham football team as well. Like, what more?
Yeah, exactly.
What more?
Mountains I might conquer in the future.
Exactly that.
You
How did you find Kathmandu? Because that's an interesting place, isn't it?
Oh my goodness! I thought, well, now I'm a Londoner. I thought I'm a city girl right now. Absolutely not. It was carnage. It was, am I going to get run over today? But it's so exciting, and also the dogs, the dogs everywhere. Oh my goodness, absolute cuteness, and oh yeah, it's just such a buzz, isn't it? It's incredible.
And obviously, like, I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago about the problems at Loughler Airport in October, and you were part of that. You were part of that. I mean, you were on the better side than the Island Peak side, but you still did have a couple of days trapped in Ramchap to get your flights as part of that. How was it stuck in Ramchap?
It was, we joke about it now, right? And it's all part of the experience. But we were like, because the resort we stay at is called Freedom Resort, and it felt like prison for 3 days, in a fun way, because you make the most of it, don't you? But we went on a hike one day. That was beautiful to see the local area, and obviously we had a few little drinks, so it was fine. And you meet other groups as well when you're there, which is cool.
Yeah.
But Keith, like, again, me booking stuff and not looking what I'm booking, I didn't realize the whole Loughler thing was a thing, and that you could get cancellations, and the weather really impacts it. So when the flights got cancelled, I was like, what is happening here? Totally not ready for that. So that was a big, I think a lot of people felt the same, actually, were quite shocked that happened. And then to get cancelled on the second day as well, I think we were all getting a bit annoyed. But you're annoyed at this. You're annoyed at the situation, right? You understand that you don't want these planes to fly in dangerous weather, of course. But yeah, it was a wild time. But you know what's so funny? The moment you're in the air going towards Loughler, it's all forgotten. You're like, it's cool.
Yeah, I know. It's being a guide. It's one of the hardest things when you have to deal with something like that, because it's the weather, and people look at you like you can do something about it. Like, people are like, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, I don't know what you want me to do about the weather. But like you say, as long as you can get there, and as long as you can sort something out. I mean, we were trying everything with your group. We were trying to get you helicopters, and we had a plan for the next day to have helicopters to get you up. But obviously, because you were like 20 in your group, we needed like 5 helicopters to get you all up, 6 helicopters. And I was like, right, just hold it for the morning. I've been checking the forecast. It looks good for tomorrow. And, we've been promised the first 2 flights for our group, which was amazing that we had managed to get promised, because there were so many people trapped there at that time. And, on that day, 3 flights actually left that day to fly to Loughler, and we had 2 of those planes.
I know. It's terrifying, isn't it, to think that could have not been our group.
And then it was like another 4 days worth of no planes flying after that as well. It would have been a disaster, but we managed to get you there. And I mean, to be fair, it must have been pretty amazing. And I mean, I've done it before where we've had like a couple of days of no flying, and we've been the first flight out that day. And the trail is just so lovely and quiet.
Yeah, it really was. And again, I don't think I appreciated that until the way back. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's so many people.
Yeah.
And I am truly grateful for the delays, like I put on the Facebook post, because it would have been really intimidating, I think, to have queues of people behind you and people in front of you. And, you want to take a photo and there's a million bodies everywhere.
I mean, again, like it's from like my perspective of being there, like lots of times now, you can compare it between this time and that time. But for like you going there for the first time, like you've got nothing to compare it to. Like you just think, well, this is normal. But like you say, once you turned around and you were coming back down, and there were people there who, had 4 days, 5 days of nobody on the trail, and all of a sudden they're flying everybody in. It would have made a massive difference to the traffic coming in the opposite direction.
Yeah, definitely. And even the tea houses, I guess, right? They were quieter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They'd have been, everywhere you went, like going into the cafes, like they'd have been really quiet and they'd have been begging you to come in because they wouldn't have had anybody up there really for a couple of days. So there'd just been this lull in people heading up the mountain.
Yeah.
But obviously, like you said earlier, like I chatted to you in Moshi about Nepali Flat, and I was like, don't compare Kilimanjaro to Everest Base Camp because it's not a mountain. Like you're not going to spend the first few days walking uphill and then come back down again. Like you've got to be prepared for that. How was that shock when you finally remembered that conversation we had over a couple of drinks in the bar?
What I remembered is when we got into Lukla, fine, and you come around the airport and then you go downhill quite a long time. And I was like, right, okay, this is this is what Keith meant about ups and downs and whatnot. And yeah, I just thought, well, we've got to come up at some point. This is not going to be pleasant.
Yeah, I think people then forget it again, and it's not until they turn around to come back down, and then they suddenly remember that hill that they walked down at the start.
Yeah.
And then they've got to walk back up that to get to Lukla again. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, because of course you've just got off the plane. You're desperate to get trekking, like more so for you guys, because you have been stuck in Ramchat for 3 days. So you were desperate to get going. So you almost just start walking and go, oh, okay. And then you almost don't realize because you're chatting away to everybody. And next minute you're like, we've just walked down this massive hill. And then you just forget about it to come back up again.
Exactly. And I found it, the worst part of it was on the last day, just before the Hillary Bridge, I fell over and hurt my ankle. And it was such I didn't want to, I could have gotten a mule maybe or something, but I was like, no, I'm stubborn. I will continue to the end. And I had to do all those uphills with a dodgy leg. Oh, it was traumatic, honestly. But I do it again now because I've once again forgotten the pain.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of uphill on the last day that I was not ready for.
How did you find, like, comparing, obviously you did the Marangu route on Kilimanjaro, so you were in the huts. How did you compare that with being in the tea houses on the EBC trek?
I mean, I guess they're similar in that you're in a somewhat of a building, right? But the tea houses felt like luxury. And I know, the bedrooms are cold and whatnot, but for the Marangu route, I took a 5-season sleeping bag because I was still cold in the huts. I don't know how I was so cold, but in the tea houses, I thought I had a 4-season plus, and I thought they were luxury, honestly, to have a bedroom and to sleep on kind of a mattress. It was absolutely lovely. And then I was getting the hot water bottles every night as well, religiously every night. It was great. And some of the bedrooms had a bathroom as well.
Yeah, further down. You might even get a shower in one if you're lucky. All right, it's probably going to be cold, but
I did get a shower at Dingbashay, but the shower it felt like it was connected to a boiler, and the boiler you could see the temperature on it, and it kept going up and up, and I felt like a boiled potato. But it was quite nice to feel warmth at that point,
Yeah. I normally I'll have one at Namche, and then I'll have one at Dingbashay, and then generally on the way back down, like Monjo or Lukla, you might be lucky enough to have a shower in your room in one of those two, and then then you're all right. Then what about the food? What about the food difference?
I was really pleasantly surprised by the food at Kilimanjaro because the food has to be carried up, right? I thought the food was great. I'm not a fussy eater anyway, Keith, to be honest. So every night I thought, fair play, the food is amazing. Like it's warm, it's good food. It was just incredible. But obviously the difference is in the tea houses you have menus, whereas on Kili you just kind of get what you're given almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
I personally thought the food was great on Everest Base Camp. I didn't have any problems. I didn't lose my appetite. I'll never do in my life ever. I thought the food was amazing.
And
selection.
I mean, I think the only thing I think on the it's great to be able to order it from a menu because obviously you can eat what you feel like at that point. I just think potentially like the menu, whichever tea house you go in, it's exactly the same menu in it. Like they're identical.
Yeah. So I guess you kind of can get a little bit bored by the time you get
because it's 13 days rather than like 5-6 days on Kilimanjaro, isn't it? So
yeah, that's another day length. The length of the trip. Once again, me not preparing for it. I was at the airport and I was looking at the app, that your company app, and I thought, oh my god, the trip's actually really long, because Kili was over in 6 days, isn't it? The up and down. But base camp, I thought, oh lord, the trekking, there's so much trekking, and like I'm not going to be able to do this like physically. But I did.
So would you advise not to really look into it then? Just book it beforehand, and that be that.
I think it works well in my situation to just go in and just hope for the best. Ignorance is bliss.
Like, in terms of, if I had to ask you the question then, like, which was the most difficult, Everest Base Camp or Kilimanjaro? Now, bearing in mind you did them so close together,
yeah,
like both memories are quite vivid in in your mind.
Yeah.
Where would you go to answer that question?
In terms of difficulty?
Yeah, in terms of which one did you find the most difficult?
When I was doing base camp, every time I thought, oh God, this is a bit difficult, and it was probably because there was a million steps going uphill, I always thought back to summit night and thought, it's not as bad as summit night. So based on that, I think Kili was still harder because of that one night alone. But that said, base camp is longer. You've got the ups and downs, and you've got the ups and downs on the return. So it was a lot more taxing in that respect. But yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't think I can say one or the other, but basically summit night was very, very hard, and I will never forget how hard that is.
And if you could choose to do them both again, would you do them in the order that you did them, or would you switch it?
I think I'd still do it in the order that I did it, because I think with summit night being as hard as it was, nothing was ever going to be as bad as that. And also, I think it prepared me well for just base camp in general, I suppose. I don't know really. I think I could do it in reverse now, knowing what it involves, but I think it got me ready in terms of, okay, Kilimanjaro was 6 days, it was trekking, it was, being in the huts, it was using the holes for toilets. But base camp was just longer, so it got me ready in that respect of, okay, you're going to have a longer trip. But yeah, I don't know really, to be honest.
And obviously Kilimanjaro's at 5,895 meters, base camp's at 5,200 and something meters. Did the fact that you weren't going as high as you had already been, did that help you? Did that play on your mind with the Everest Base Camp trek? Did that make a difference?
I feel like mentally, I thought when I went to base camp, well, I've done Kili, and that's not far off 6,000. So if I can do that and I was okay on that, then I'll definitely be fine doing base camp. And I was, obviously, in terms of altitude, I didn't suffer at all. I don't know if, even when Dave was doing the sats in the evening, my sats were incredible. They were above 90. I think they were 91% at Gorakhsha. Like, I was so saturated.
Well, because you were within like that 2-week period, 3-week period, you were still already acclimatized. You were still acclimatized from your Kilimanjaro trip. So
yeah.
You were going into base camp already pre-acclimatized, really.
Yeah, definitely. But obviously physically I was struggling. So.
And do you think that your body was still tired from Kili when you started on base camp?
Yeah, I think so. And I thought this several times on base camp as well, because, I got back to the UK and then you're straight back into work as well. So it's not like you're just resting, is it? You're not kind of having any much downtime. So I did feel like maybe I would have been better off having a bigger break, but at the same time, I felt like it was good to go straight into it, because I felt like I just got off the plane from Tanzania and just got on another plane to Nepal. So,
and we forgot to mention as well, because you did. Well, we said about the safari because we talked about the single sup, but you did add the safari onto your Kilimanjaro trek. Like, how did you find the safari? Was that nice to go and do that after Kili?
Yeah, definitely. whilst I booked it, and then I'd seen on some forums that some people had done the safari before doing the trek, and I could never have imagined it doing that way around. I think it was a nice way to kind of conclude your journey. Obviously, at that point, you've made loads of friends, so you're really comfortable being with who you're with. But it's like a nice little treat as well to see loads of the animals and go around different national parks and whatnot afterwards.
And if I had to ask you to pick a favourite Kilimanjaro and Everest base camp, could you do it?
No, I could not. I really couldn't, because they are different. Like Kilimanjaro, it just feels like you're going up a mountain, like up. You just go up it. Base camp is an experience. It's a journey. Like there's so many people. I think you meet a lot more people and you see a lot more people on doing base camp with the tea houses and whatnot. But definitely in terms of my trips alone, like I just met such amazing people on both trips that I just couldn't possibly pick between them at all based on that.
And do you know what? I kind of understand, because everyone says to me, like, I spend my life traveling. What's your favorite trip? And I can't give people an answer, because they are all so different for different reasons.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have a favorite. I would like to enjoy all of them. And I think, those two trips they're both so similar and so different at the same time. And like, I would struggle to pick one out. Well, Becky, thanks ever so much for coming on to the podcast today. It's been really interesting to chat with you. I love when we get on customers of the Bucket List Company to talk and explain their journey, because I think actually people can resonate when they're listening more than if I'm chatting to Jake or I'm talking to Dave or somebody else.
Yeah.
Hearing it from a real person who's done it, and they're sat there going, oh, that's how I feel about it. Like that, I haven't done any training, I haven't done this, I'm new to this, I've never done that before. So thanks ever so much for taking the time to come and join us. Like, one thing I do always ask new people who come onto the podcast is, what is next on Becky's bucket list?
Well, I remember. Do you remember one time I mentioned doing Island Peak to you, and you were like, I don't think you need to do Island Peak. I think base camp is enough for you. And I thought, yeah, fair enough. But at the same time, I think doing these two trips, I do kind of feel quite ambitious now, and I think nothing is off limits.
No?
I want to do K2 base camp. I do.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but I think, why not? And I do want to do Machu Picchu as well. So I think those are my next two that I will look at doing, definitely.
Perfect. And like, if you could look back now, like, I mean, when did you book these two trips? They weren't that long ago you booked them, was it? You booked them.
I think it was December.
Yeah. So if we were to look back in November and say, like, Becky, would you ever consider climbing Island Peak in November? Like, what would you say to someone if they said to you?
In November last year, absolutely.
Yeah.
No way. Like, the risk, not for me. But now you just feel so inspired, don't you? When you're in the outdoors and you're in these places and you see what you see and you come across all these people that have done these incredible things, you just think, no, I can do it. And it's such a wonderful feeling. And I think for me, I'm approaching my mid-30s and feeling like I haven't done much or whatever, to then, the old me would have thought I'm incapable, but the new me is like, no, I can do it. I'll give it a go, And I do feel like I've had a bit of a personality transplant. And I think, it's wonderful, really.
And I think, that's super important, that, you have ambition, you have something to look forward to, you have the next thing that you want to be aiming for. And I think it's just a really great story on how somebody, that is not from, a walking, trekking, hiking background, just suddenly sat there one day and went, I want to do that. And, you just show that actually everything is possible. And like I always say, there's no reason why anybody can't climb Kilimanjaro. There's no reason why anybody can't go up to Everest Base Camp if they really want to do it. There is, no limitations there for people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what's funny is doing these two trips back to back, and since coming back, people are like, that's amazing what you've done. Absolutely incredible. Like, we're so proud of you. And it hasn't hit me yet. And I'm like, why are you proud of me? Like, I don't see it. I do see it as an achievement, but it still hasn't hit me what I've done.
Yeah. Well, I think what you have done is amazing because, you know, I've done back-to-back Kilimanjaro trips and EBC trips, and I know exactly how strenuous they are on the body. So, you know, for someone who's not used to that background and, you know, doesn't do it all the time, I think you did amazing. And I also want to thank you as well for like me getting one of my best photos that I've ever taken on Kilimanjaro. You were able to stand there still for like 15 seconds while I managed to take that photo. So, and we might even put that photo up as the is the photo for this podcast, so you can see which photo we're talking about. But nobody else managed in the group to be able to stand still for long enough. So thanks for doing that as well for me, Becky.
You're most welcome. I'll do anything for a photo, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it was well liked on Instagram, wasn't it? You did get a lot of likes off that one as well. So
yeah, exactly. And I've printed it off, and it's in my mum's living room. So
oh, is it? Did it come out all right?
Stunning, absolutely stunning.
Perfect. Well, again, Becky, thanks ever so much for coming on and chatting to us today. I've really enjoyed hearing your story again. And hopefully everyone at home has enjoyed it as well, and hopefully given you some inspiration to get your next trips booked. And if you'd like to check out details of our Kilimanjaro and Everest Base Camp treks, then I will put the links to those in the show notes on the podcast, and maybe you could be booking back-to-back trips like Becky as well. But that's it all from me this week. I'll be back next week with another episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. But until then, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.